Okay, so I'm not really closing the workshop. I'm just giving you sort of two little items here to think about. So one will be about the Institute here, trying to have you understand that actually, if you are interested in setting up a workshop, it's really quite feasible. I'll give you the constraints. Okay, that will be maybe 10 minutes discussion. The other part has to do with then sort of maybe a personal view of the workshop, and thanks, of course, to all the people who organized this. Okay, so let's begin here with this question. And so at the end of these 10 slides, I will ask who is interested.
Well,
so a little bit of background.
You already gave me some idea.
So why the name Pascal? So I'm actually in sort of one of the committees that manages both the advertising for the Institute. So this is a kind of an advertising that I'm doing, but also the conception of the whole development. So this project initially was set up almost 10 years ago. So there was trying to get the different participants and components to provide some funding in the long term, et cetera. So we had a debate about what was the name that we should give this institute. And so the consensus came up with basically Blaise Pascal. So I encourage you to look in Wikipedia to see a little bit what he did. And the reason for choosing him, I think partly is due to this little star here that you see, because Paris Saclay likes the idea that we're innovating. And there's actually a strong tech component. We try to attract enterprises in the sort of the environment around us. And so you may have heard of Pascal for other reasons. There's even religious reasons. But anyway, you may remember that there's this so-called Pascal calculator. At least when I was a kid, this was something that was better than the slide rule. And of course, today with calculators, we don't think about this anymore. So this has become obsolete in a very short time scale. You visited the different offices, the different floors. And so this is just to remind you a little bit what the capacity for this institute is. We have this small amphitheater where we spent almost all our mornings. There's a slightly bigger amphitheater, which has room for 120 people sitting down. And what Francesca told me, who is our project manager, is that actually it is possible to pool these two in a virtual sense. That is, you can have people in both rooms and they see the same screen, okay? But the speaker will only be in one of the rooms, of course. Okay, so I found the overall environment rather pleasant. And what's important is because of COVID, they invested a lot in making these rooms accessible by Zoom. And so I think that it was very convincing that the sound worked really well in the amphitheaters. Inside the rooms, that's not so high tech because you don't need to have such good acoustics. But the real motivation is that they wanted during the COVID to survive as an institute that welcomes workshops. And so they had to invest in this hybrid technology. Okay, so this are the people who work for us. So if you want to set up a workshop, these people will help us. And so you recognize, of course, Francesca, you met Jacques, who gave the opening talk, etc. So this means permanent salaries. So there are a lot of people then who are really involved in just making sure that everything works. So we had the experience, and if you're interested in more details with Marie-Jeanne or with Loïc, we had to interact a lot with Francesca. And so it's a constant dialogue, and she gives us advice, and we say, well, we would like to do something more complicated. So in particular, by default, most of these workshops for lunch, we go across the street there to that rundown building. And Loïc very wisely said, well, no, there are not so many people. Let's have something where we eat lunch here. We can continue our exchanges. So I think in terms of science, it really helps to have people stay in the building. Okay.
Raising hand, I see. Benoit is raising hand.
So, can you turn on your microphone, Benoit? It's a one-way conversation, unfortunately. We don't hear you. You want to type?
His microphone is muted. You need to turn it on.
Don't have that power. The power.
No, but it's our mouth.
Yeah.
Now.
Muted. It's still muted.
No, that's not Benoit. This is here.
That's from the
That's
participant.
me.
No, from the participant, you need to unmute.
Yeah, but I think we only can do that from the control panel. I'm not host.
It's finished, I think.
Can you?
Maybe.
All right, sorry, Benoit. We're silencing you. Okay, I thought it would be entertaining to have a little SWOT here of the Institute. We as organizers really enjoyed very much the help for the logistics. So in particular with the Indigo system and the secretaries, then basically people organize their dates. She will then reserve the hotels, etc. And quite a number of you have had the need for invitations for visas, okay? So as I said, then what really counts for Zoom is the quality of the sound. And well, actually we saw this morning that with Kazuki, everything really worked perfectly well. The quality of the pictures was great. And so I think that this is really very nice. And I added this little note because everybody in France is becoming sort of aware of the carbon footprint. The overall institute really does encourage to have people online, okay? So among the weaknesses, so Kelly had suggested that perhaps she could set up some workshop, but she needed 150 people. And so I told her, well, that's a little bit more complicated. The spirit of this institute is a lot built around mathematics and physics. And so the way those people work is they have these sort of work sessions, and we try to adapt to that. Okay, so we have these brainstorming sessions in the afternoon. We would like your feedback on that, to what extent that can be changed to make something really very productive. But it's possible, because they're very, very flexible, that they would accept other types of formats. So I can imagine that if we tell them we would like to have indeed 120 people, and we will manage to have them work in the amphitheater, not so much in the small rooms, they are flexible, okay? Another point that's maybe a little bit weak is public transportation. It's true that it's enjoyable to go down the hill, but it's a little bit less enjoyable to go up the hill, okay? That will change in, what, 1.5 years?
At the end of the year, beginning of 26, it will be open.
So, okay, there's hope that this will no longer be a problem. Okay, in terms of threats, so you'll notice I changed the order. Okay, this is a SWOT, but I'm keeping the O for last.
Okay.
So the threats, okay, well, this workshop was largely funded by the Institute. And I think that's partly because we come from a community that is underrepresented in terms of the workshops. There are very few workshops that are related to biology. So they say, okay, let's start the process. We encourage then the requests coming from biologists, and that way, that will show the way, and then this will hopefully encourage other people in biology to propose different constructions or different workshops. Okay, so we're going to begin with a non-Wu clap. So how many people have an idea of what this represents? Nobody. Okay, well, we won't ask online. Okay, obvious, okay? All right, so thank you very much. That means that, okay, there are these threats, but there are also opportunities, okay? So the opportunities that depends a lot on us scientists. What can we propose? And so, well, unfortunately, this little thing is in the way. So you can see a little bit better there. Okay, so with CRISPR, you can propose something that's maybe interesting. Okay, so before I continue, then why was the Pascal Institute created? Well, it was motivated a lot by, in fact, a different model that is based in UCSB, which is the Kavli Institute. Mr. Kavli is somebody who had quite a bit of money, said, I want to support fundamental science. At the end, he's interested more in physics because he's coming from physics. And so he funds cosmology, he funds actually some neurosciences because, well, the human brain is the ultimate frontier for some people. And here, basically, we said we want to broaden, we want to represent all the different disciplines of Paris-Saclay, but Paris-Saclay is mainly science and engineering, okay? So to date, most of these workshops have been centered on these types of interdisciplinary challenges, plus sort of core physics and climate science, geosciences, et cetera, okay? And there's, in fact, if you look at the programs, there's not that much mathematics because, in fact, the mathematicians, they're in their own world. They don't need this institute. They have their own resources. Okay. If you just quickly look at this program for this year, you'll see that actually, wow, it's dominated by really large scale stuff. So there's a lot of cosmology, astrophysics. There's also big accelerator physics. So physics is totally dominating the sort of the landscape, but we're here, we exist, okay? So the idea is that there is an opportunity. The Institute will welcome propositions from other fields, and in particular, this is a summary since 2019, which is basically when the programs really started working full time, of different programs that had some component of biology, okay? And so typically, it's a mixture of one science with biology, so it can be math, it can be data science, etc. Okay? So here we are, 2025, and I also added the duration. So if I were to go back and show you the programs in physics, some programs last 1 month, 6 weeks even, okay? So it's a different world, okay? But I negotiated with the organizers and the Institute to say, okay, we're gonna try to see if 2 weeks works. In practice, almost nobody stayed for 2 weeks. We have some exceptions. We're very happy that people are able to stay for 1 week or 2 weeks. That's really great. Okay. All right. So back to the question: who is interested in proposing an IPA workshop? Well, the topic, there are some constraints. The topic has to be within, in some sense, the interest of Paris-Saclay. Okay. They expect some contribution from the local communities. Then in terms of promoting the workshop, so those are the people who are officially going to deposit the request for the proposal of the workshop and asking for funding. There has to be at least one person from Paris-Saclay. That's not much of a constraint. Here you have Anya, who's perfectly happy to say, I can participate in something. It's just that I have no time, but if you push me hard enough, I will do it, okay? So that's the general format. That it's just a question of convincing somebody to be, sufficiently interested in helping you do this, okay? And it's true that if you want to get out of the standard framework, which is this limit of 60 participants, I'm perfectly happy to give you some good advice and to try to negotiate with the Institute, okay? All right, so then in terms of outputs, unfortunately this is being hidden, but they want some kind of output that they can sell to the governing bodies. And so in our particular case, we said we would do some position papers or related things, okay? There's a call which now is annual. It used to be every 6 months. So this is an old poster for the application. In practice, it's an interactive system. That is, you're interested in proposing something. You first check with them whether they're interested, okay? You can even send in a pre-proposal. And so there's a period where basically they are open to discussion over several months. And so what Francesca told me is it's best if we start discussing with them, for instance, in June or July of 2025, if we want to submit a project that would then be submitted by September 2025, okay? All right, so let's have our first Woo clap. I didn't know we would do it here. We're gonna do a Woo clap in old mode, that is just by hand raising. Okay, so are there any people here who would be interested or are considering such co-organization? Okay, so these are the people who are answering yes. Okay, all right, do it again so I can count. All right, okay, so 4 people. Let's just do the undecided then. That's all the rest probably, right? Maybe 1 no. You can say no, it's okay.
Well, you're not obliged.
Okay, fine. So with that,
we could also organize with other sites. For instance, is it possible to have a joint event with Ghent University or other university?
It should be possible.
It could be also something interesting.
so I'm not sure that they have done that, but certainly there's every reason to believe that this is possible.
Especially with the efficiency of you could even imagine perhaps some events on 2 locations. Because the system is so efficient, you could have 50 people in Ghent or as an example, and 50 here, and they would exchange with this. I don't know if they.
So it might
1 week in Ghent and 1 week in
No,
here, or
for you, except you. Okay, for you.
no, not me, not me.
it might be sufficiently original that they would actually be very interested. Okay. All right. So second part.
Last thing, maybe there was something in the chat.
Ah,
Yeah, someone put
Maybe
something in the chat.
Yeah,
You have to
check.
put your finger, click on the plus. Yeah. And
Then
No,
conversation.
that's
Yeah.
participants, no.
probably someone says something.
Yeah.
Ah,
not yet. Okay. So Bruno is potentially interested, and Helke is definitely interested. Okay.
Benoit says we can't see your screen online.
Is that still true, Benoit? Benoit, you still cannot see the screen?
Because at 11:50, it's okay now.
Okay.
Yes.
So how do I close
And
this?
Eike is also interested in.
all good.
All's good.
Thanks.
Okay. So how do I close this?
Yeah.
Okay. How am I doing on time, Marjan? I can take 10 more minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Okay.
But I'm thinking for 2027, if I'm still alive, not next year, I'm already be busy, so.
No problem.
But you have, if you want to organize in 27, you have to apply this year.
Ah.
Because now they are almost 1 year
There's a queue.
already busy.
There's a
So
queue, and there's also some pressure. And so, in fact, we could have done the program in 2024, but we found that it was maybe useful to have more time to prepare. And in the end, we were very happy to have that extra time. Okay, so looking back, looking ahead. All right. So is this a controversial assessment? So plants are part of the quote to be found solutions to fulfill sustainable developmental goals of the United Nations. I think everybody will say, all right, he's not pushing anything. I'm not going to go into any controversies. As you may know, I'm not a plant biologist. I'm a physicist by training. So I won't say anything that is outside of my domain of expertise. So some of us were in these sessions in the afternoon about how scientists interact with the general public. And one of the questions was, what are the constraints imposed by your employer? Okay. And so what I actually discovered, I was being very cautious. I generally try to avoid anything that's controversial. But the employer says, you're allowed to talk, even if it's controversial, about something where you're a specialist, okay? So I'm not a specialist of plant biology, so I won't say anything about plant biology. So nothing about CRISPR, except a little joke, okay? That's behind us. Okay, similarly, I took this back from one of the slides of Paul Ledley for IPBES. So it's very nice to have these international organizations that provide from scientists some objective numbers, and from which then policymakers can decide whether they want to act or not, okay? So here's an example which is more directly in phase with our engagement for than plant science and agriculture. I heard an echo there, but maybe not. Is there a sound microphone that went on? Well, we'll see. Okay, so far so good. Okay, so the motivations for the workshop, well, that must be by now obvious. I took back some of the points that were in the slides of Loic, and Loic, the first day, did a huge panorama of all the different themes that were potentially interesting to us. So I thought it would be nice to mention, though, that after the talk of Olivier Amand, we're all into this idea that if you're a specialist, you're not robust, and if you're a generalist, you're much more robust, okay? So what I do see, though, is that there's a very robust trend which is going in the wrong direction, okay? There's climate change, which is going in the wrong direction. There's biodiversity, which is going in the wrong direction. And the problem is that that's very robust. So it's very difficult to fight that, okay? So all these different problems are very difficult. And so we also more or less convince ourselves today that there's no single magic bullet, okay? And so I try to say that to tackle that, actually, even if you have a very modest approach, which is using a spoon to empty your bathtub, well, we'll take it. That is, everybody can contribute. One little point I want to mention also is during some of the brainstorming sessions, it was pointed out that there are different challenges, there are barriers, okay? So I'll come back to that. But overall, these are sort of some of the points which I again took from Loic's slides. And so we are here also to discuss and exchange what our views on priorities are and how plant scientists can contribute to these very important problems, okay? So here are some minor points that I'm sharing with you as a physicist, okay? Remember, I was born a physicist. So one of the sessions mentioned that, in fact, sometimes a small startup company will come up with some product which actually is really a game changer. It will have potentially a large influence, but you're threatening a certain market, and in particular, if there's a big player in the market, he will probably just buy you out and then make sure that your product never comes to market, okay? So I have a little variant on that. Since I'm of a certain age and I was exposed to computers quite young, there was a phase during the early 1990s there where a lot of us thought that IBM was going to go out of business. So it was this huge company which was basically completely monopolizing the mainframe market, which was the only market for computers for several decades. It had sort of just control over everything. It was 90% of the mainframe market, okay? And this is not the sort of the value of the business, but it's the estimated value in terms of market value, which means it's the stock, okay? It's easy to find numbers for stocks more than for the benefit of the profit of the company. So what happened was there was a initiation of microcomputers, and people very clearly understood that that market was going to take off. And then what do you do with the mainframe market? The mainframe market is still important. It's just that it has no more growth, okay? So IBM said, okay, we'll keep the mainframe and we'll also invest in the microcomputers. And so there's the IBM PC that appeared around there, okay? That's fine, okay? These two markets are separate. What happened in reality is that the microcomputers made so much progress so quickly, and the market was so big that IBM at some point was confronted with the fact that these microcomputers were becoming sufficiently powerful that they were challenging their mainframes. So the business model of IBM was basically falling through. They had these mainframes, which people no longer wanted to buy. They considered that if I buy this mainframe, in 1 or 2 years, that mainframe will be obsolete. I can buy a very cheap computer that's much less sort of obsolete in a few years. And you may remember these different companies like Sun Microsystems that had really workstations that everybody in academia was buying for a while. And then there was the competition in terms of the microcomputers. So Dell, Compaq, et cetera, were just crushing the market for microcomputers. So even though IBM got there first and they invested first, in fact, their product was not making them any money, okay? So that's this big dip here. Over a period of 5 or 8 years, things were looking really bad for IBM. And they basically just said, okay, well, we have a difficult situation. We're going to try to ride it through. And they managed to do it, surprisingly, okay? They didn't want to kill their mainframe business. They kept it sort of alive, but they innovated sufficiently that actually they were able to come through, okay? Now, if we come back to this question here, they could have said, we're going to just buy out Compaq and Dell, okay? But the problem was Compaq and Dell were not for sale. Okay, so you've got to catch these small businesses in time to kill them, but once they think they're really going to take off, it's too late. Okay, so that's an issue of, you know, it's not science, it's really competition and how things work in that field. Okay, another experience that is maybe worth taking home is the fact that today all of our nuclear power stations are based on uranium. Okay, and if you look in any kind of, you know, reasonable document, the explanation is very simple. World War II, we built atomic bombs from uranium and plutonium, okay? Uranium is very convenient for producing plutonium. So you got into this sort of technology where you had a good enough knowledge so that, in fact, it was very difficult to start another kind of model for creating nuclear power, okay? And that's been going on for decades. So I was in an institute of nuclear science for many years. There's a little department of theoretical physics inside that bigger department. And 20 years ago, one of my colleagues explained to me, we are very frustrated because in academia, we know that the right thing to do is to change the technology to go from uranium to thorium. It turns out that there's huge advantages. So I encourage you to look this up. The amount of resources in thorium is vast, much more ubiquitous than for uranium. And it doesn't have the major problem of nuclear power today, which is that there's the risk of having the nuclear reactor melt, okay? Basically, what happens is that there's a chain reaction that can occur in uranium. It does not occur in thorium. Okay, so that was the first story. Second story, I didn't actually know myself this term plant blindness, even though I live it every day. I'm married to a medical person, a person who does research in medical science. Every time I turn on the TV, if I'm on this channel, that's silence ça pousse, in 3 seconds, the channel has to change. Okay. So during the conference, somebody say, we need something like Grey's Anatomy to make plants sexy, okay?
Life in a lab.
Okay, I never really that much like Grey's Anatomy. I like though Dr. House, but that's because I like detective type stories, okay? So this here is not gonna work. I don't know how many of you, let's just do a little poll, have heard of Man vs. Wild. It's a TV series where this person, which is an ex-soldier, he goes out in the wild, he gets dropped off and he has a mission. He has to walk 500 miles or something. He has to go over mountains, etc. And he has to survive in the wild. He has a knife and some matches. That's basically it, okay? And so he encounters animals, but he also encounters a lot of plants. So something like that could tell you exactly how you can survive in the wild thanks to knowledge about plants, okay? I have some colleagues who are fascinated by mushrooms, but this would be, something for the public, which is also about learning about, the miracles of plants. Something that's maybe more realistic is something that goes back to an old series of documentaries called L'Aventure des Plantes. And I used to show my kids the succession of this, which is called Les Inventions de la Vie, which is basically all of the things that life has invented. The focus there is maybe 90% plants, 90% animals and 10% plants, but there's this one here, which in particular is 100% about plants. So a problem is that the quality of the images is not so great. And as you can see, basically this goes back to 1980s, and it would have to be restored, and it would have to be translated to have any kind of impact. But maybe with AI, that would be a cheap solution. Okay, it's possible that contacting the editors of the rights on this.
It's not expensive. It's only $15.
Well, that was 1980. No, the idea is that you can offer this for free. We're not here to make money. Okay. All right. Last game changer was artificial intelligence. We had in particular Gabriel Kruk, who sent us all the original picture and the transformed picture by ChatGPT. It's quite realistic, okay? And so I think it's a nice little test here to try to detect, what are the features which allow us to say, well, there's one picture which is a produced artificial intelligence picture, okay? So qualitatively, what you see is that when ChatGPT works on these kinds of pictures, it sort of idealizes some things. So some of the details go away, all right? But
on the picture anymore on the right. I was in the front and I
No, you said right there.
we're not trying to reproduce. That is, I just give you these two pictures and I ask you which is the one.
longer. He has considered.
We're not trying to ask which is the whether it's reproducing reality. We're just asking, does it make a realistic picture? So is this realistic? And so the answer is, well, pretty realistic, okay? One thing that's quite striking with modern AI is it tends to improve resolutions. And we saw that with Gabriel, picture of the tree for the plant main page. That is, you give it a picture which has a certain level of detail, it can enhance the detail, make the tree look more realistic, okay? So here what we see is that the text is more realistic. The text is much more precise, okay? But this here is so fuzzy. If you look at a larger scale thing, you'll see here, it's written then Christian Huyghe, and here it's all messed up,
Yeah.
okay? Because in fact, it's difficult to read this. So he invented something, okay? But when he invents, it's crisp. It's really very clear, okay? All right, but what is important is this. AIs, they are in their world where they've been trained, and they haven't been brought up to learn that when you fall, you hurt yourself. So what's missing a lot in their training is the physical world. So I like to say this because I'm a physicist, right? Okay, so what is it that is wrong in the picture on the right compared to the picture on the left? So what I would like to convince you is that there's certain aspects which are, in some sense, there's a logic which is incorrect here, whereas it's correct there. Okay, so I'll give you 30 seconds to think of some propositions. What is it that really is like a smoking gun, since that expression is something that Roberto likes a lot? Yes?
In the movie, the screen is another, which is the direct capture of what is happening.
So here you'll note there's some sort of defects which AI corrects. So this is not even a straight. This is the screen, which indeed is floppy. And here it replaced the screen by something which is rigid, which has a perfect frame. So it's just replacing something that's imperfect by something that's perfect. But does that make it unrealistic?
Same for the people.
And the people, I mean,
So one thing that's psychological, so I think computers or AI doesn't have psychology. It doesn't have physics, but it doesn't have psychology either. Here, this is a typical posture, which we will have during the lecture, where either we're sort of relaxed or we're doing something else. Here, we're the perfect students. We're listening to the master, okay? So this is more realistic, but it's still not a smoking gun.
it's, I mean, the guy talking, I mean, movie is different from
Yes, so the AI has not understood.
blue and black.
The AI has not understood, well, in terms of the colors, this is the original. So in fact, what it means is that the camera is giving you an unfaithful reproduction of the colors, okay?
And it's not the same person, yeah?
But what's physically important is that this is supposed to be the same posture as this, okay? There's a slight delay.
He hasn't understood that these are connected.
That's right. So that's the flaw, the logical flaw that it has.
Yeah.
And so it's invented, what's really interesting, it went to go get some pictures of people lecturing, and here this person has a pointer. There's no pointer here, okay? So that's okay. You're allowed to say, okay, I can't, if I look at this virtual Christian and this true Christian, they're both legitimate. But if I say this has to be the same as that, here it works, and here this person does not have a pointer.
He doesn't wear a t-shirt.
He does not understand that.
And the clothes have changed slightly, okay? Okay. So that's the kind of thing, if you're thinking about, detecting fake videos, you think about the logic. What is it that logically a human knows is true, either because of physics or because of psychology, that in some sense the machine has missed.
But I mean, don't you think that future?
Yes, this is temporary. It's going to get more and more difficult.
All these things and.
Okay.
But it's interesting, it has actually understood that the computer is the same, because in the real picture, the computer looks different.
It understands a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it lives in a wireless world.
But
It got rid of this cable.
All
Got rid of the cable. Yes, it simplifies things, but it's still realistic.
And there's an additional plug there.
Yeah.
Compare all the
and the plugs are round.
yeah.
Discard the imperfections. This is why he discard my head.
Yes, I think that's you. That's you. We'll come back to that later.
Guillotine, guillotine.
I've been effacé.
Okay.
Erased from the.
Null mutant.
All right. So this was the fact that this level of detail is much higher than in the original project, and that's because this one here was for pay. So Gabriel has a version that you pay 25 euros a month, and we still have not invested, or SPS has not invested in the paid version of ChatGPT. Okay, so, all right, great. My battery is getting weak, but that's fine. So these are, again, topics that were mentioned by Loïc in his slides. So we want to contribute to this kind of reflection, but we need to include some kind of novelty. And so remember I talked about deliverables for the workshops? Well, here we are. We need to say something about what we're going to give the Institut Pascal. And we don't have an infinite time to do this. We have a few months. So one option would be really minimal, which would be just to explain what the workshop was about, to give the program, to say what the original format was, and see if we can get that to be posted somewhere. And so apparently Susan Brink said, they should give me a 2-page summary that could be useful. Okay. All right. So
It's applied science, right?
So yeah. One issue is that to make that a little bit scientific.
Precision for tips, she's interested in any position paper, any topics, but the first thing and the short thing idea is that she would agree to publish the idea that it's interesting to make such a workshop. So when she talk about a very short 1 or 2-page papers,
That's the minimal version.
this is just to talk not about the content of our discussion, but the idea that to have such a transversal discussion for a 1 week at least, it's an interesting concept.
It's novel.
And she said that it's not so current, so often, so she would agree to push this idea because she found it quite interesting.
Okay, so then there's a maximal option where we have 3 position papers covering the 3 themes. And so the people who organize the afternoon sessions would clearly be strongly involved in that particular task. An intermediate option would be some kind of mix where maybe we're, we more or less did promise a position paper for the fundamental science, but clearly there was a lot of enthusiasm for theme 2 and theme 3. Well, here are the last sort of workers involved. Okay, so do you have a general feeling for what is possible? That is there enough material coming from the afternoon sessions in particular to have 3 position papers? So that would be the maximal option. Or we just wait to see. That is, do you have a strong opinion there? Or if you have no particular opinion, well, okay, we'll just see when we walk. Yeah.
Regarding theme 3, I think it's not enough. We were not as many as planned, and also we had very interesting discussions, but more informal. And personally, my feeling is that we don't have enough material.
I think there were a lot of considerations that were shared by the 3 themes.
There's some overlap also. Yeah.
So I think the third option is probably the best. I think.
All right.
Just to try to,
Yes,
we could write 1 paper with maybe 3 chapters or something, but then have some things in common.
Also, the people told me that we had discussion, but one of the questions is, do we wish just to summarize the discussion, or do we want to take this opportunity that some people that were involved develop a little bit what they said? So, I mean, to go more far than what we discussed, because as you said, there were not so many people, not so much time, etc. So we could just use the discussion we had as a starting point to elaborate or to write something more elaborate with the people interested in. So I mean, we need an additional work, not only what we did during the 2 weeks, but to use what we did and what we said during the 2 weeks as a starting point to develop a little bit 3-4 position paper on the different topic. The first point. And the second point is, here you said some number of papers, but we will really have also to think about addressing, talking to different people. So we need to make, if possible, some report or position paper for scientists, but we need also to think, to write something for students or for
policymakers,
and it will be something else. And so, yeah.
It might be on the same topics, but not the same way.
Yeah,
So
it will not be the same message.
and yeah, and Benoit is saying that for teaching and training, maybe we could consider a paper in Plant People Planet. So maybe something specific for education.
Yeah.
Yes. So same for innovation. We discussed that possibility because we had a quite interesting discussion in the innovation sessions with insights that were far below science. And I think it could be also, so we started to discuss that possibility of using the 2 or 3 topics.
In fact, I don't know if you agree, but my idea was to let the coordinator of the different session, so we have 3 thematic sessions and 3 or 4 transversal sessions, to let them the opportunity to think about how they want to report, if they just want to make the summary or develop something, and after to make some proposal and come back to the executive committee. And after, when we agree about the type of journal or type of report, we will contact all the participants and or all the speakers to ask them if they agree to develop some point in this special paper. But I would let the opportunity to the people that chair the different session to make proposal first. And after we'll contact the participants and speakers to see how they want to make some inputs. But I think because we need to work, yeah, I think the most efficient is to let the chair of the different session to make the proposal for their own topic. And after, with Olivier and a few speakers, at the end, anyway, we will have to make a general summary of the different initiatives, etc.
Okay, before my battery goes dead, then, these are people we should thank, so Marie-Jeanne, Ruik, and also, of course, Francesca, who won't be here for lunch, and all the people who worked very hard. And I was really relieved because getting the afternoon sessions to work was really a non-trivial task, and all these people worked very hard to make that happen.